Today's episode of the Presleevables is brought to you by Tales of Adventure.
First of all, you're going to want to head over to toamagic.com. That's the website for Tales of Adventure, where you can find the best deals on singles and seal product from standard releases all the way up to vintage. For the higher end cards, those cards come with individual scans, so you can actually see the card that you're purchasing before you make a decision. Also, be making sure to follow at TOA Michael on Twitter. That's the handle for the store owner, Michael Caffrey. He regularly posts sales and deals throughout the week, so you're going to be wanting to follow that account as well. Lastly, make sure to use promo code Resleevables at checkout for 8% off any order, and keep in mind that all domestic orders are shipped with free tracking. Again, that's toamagic.com, at TOA Michael on Twitter, and use promo code Resleevables at checkout for 8% off of your order.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Presleevables, Wilds of Eldraine edition. Host, Cedric Phillips, Cedric A. Phillips and all the things. Most, Patrick Sullivan at Basic Mountain on Twitter. Because you're no fun.
You, the biggest fan of rebrands that I know.
It's my favorite thing.
Finally brought to heel under the Sauron gaze of reality.
It's true.
No one's calling it X.
Yeah, it's not a thing. It's never going to be a thing. I did it for 2 episodes. I'm pretty proud of myself. We're moving into blue now, folks. Now, if you've joined us for our past 2 episodes, you've seen us go over the mechanics of Wilds of Eldraine along with the white cards for our top 5 list. And speaking of those top 5 lists, we each have made one here for these blue cards. Mine focuses on competitive play and what I think are going to be the 5 best blue cards from Wilds of Eldraine. Yours focuses on
my favorite designs. Things that I think are well crafted or tell a great story or solve a novel problem. Not necessarily powerful, but some of them may be.
I am going to be getting things today with Ice Out. 1 blue, a 3-mana instant with Bargain. This spell costs 1 less to cast if it's bargained and is counter target spell. So at its floor, it's cancel. And at its best, it's counterspell.
Minus a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why minus?
Because you have to sacrifice something.
Okay, that's true. Well,
you're down whatever the thing
at
is.
Its best. Maybe it's a food token, maybe it's a treasure token. I'm not saying those things are nothing. Those are game pieces that are actually useful. But, we have seen there are some standard formats, certainly not in Pioneer, really, or Modern, where cancel is playable. But there are some standard formats where a cancel is a playable card.
Cancel with very small upside gets played all the time.
Yeah.
Even if it's rare for cancel itself to show up, cancel with trivial upside is a regular feature of standard.
So this one, because it could be a cheaper version of that card, could see a little bit of play. It's also why it's number 5 on my list, because I'm not entirely sure that's true. But if this were to show up in Magic's newest standard format, would I be surprised? Not really.
No, I feel the exact same way. The likelihood that it's the best card in the format or something that's perceived to be oppressive, I think is really, really low. But I would bet on this appearing in decks for sure.
Now, much like what happened in our white episode, this card is also on your list. Again, it is number 4 on your list. Why is it on there?
I like giving people the counterspell experience, even though it's playing with fire a little bit.
Okay.
This one naturally doesn't stack very well. Unlike some of the reduce this cost down, the second and third copy of this is not easy to continue to bargain with.
Okay.
So I like the fact that, you can certainly reduce this down to counterspell, but the second, third, fourth copy, the cost of doing that is implicitly going up and up. I also like giving the blue control counterspell experience some incentive to play with permanents.
Yep.
Often when the deck doesn't play very well, it's just all instant sorceries and lands. And this pretty loudly says, you got to have some stuff in your deck to be able to get this down to 2 mana. So it solves an incentive issue and gives people the counterspell experience, but there's sort of an organic backstop to it being actual counterspell.
Okay. Well, let's get to number 5 on your list now, since we happen to go over number 4. We'll stick with you. We're going to go to Archive Dragon. It's 4 blue. It's a 6-mana dragon wizard with flying, ward 2. And when Archive Dragon enters the battlefield, scry 2. So there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, very simple. This is sort of in that aspiring to be, I assume, in that air elemental uncommon limited bomb sort of space. It's not a constructed player in my mind. But what I like about this is you want to do some dragons at lower rarity from time to time because people like dragons. It's exciting to see some of the stuff at lower rarity. It conveys something about the world. But unfortunately, you can get into the spot where the amount of powers you have to put on the thing to make it feel like a dragon makes it inappropriate for uncommon. It's a tough needle to thread. This has a lot of stuff going on. It certainly feels like a special game piece, but it's really not complicated in play. You basically have a 4/6 flying with Ward 2 after you've resolved the enters the battlefield trigger, but it will certainly feel splashy enough to make sense as a dragon.
Definitely feels like a dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without it being super complicated.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to do well, and I think this one does it. I also like, given the fact that, this is a set with a lot of creature types matter sort of stuff, but dragon and wizard are not really among that spectrum of supported creatures.
Yep.
That it's really simple because those sort of creatures should be off in their own world, kind of doing their own thing. This is not connected to any of the set mechanics. This is not connected to really anything. It makes sense for, sort of a blue distant dragon that isn't about anything going on in the set to have its own little story. It's a really nice, tight design.
We're moving on to number 4 for me. And for me, I have Quick Study. 2 in a blue. So it's a 3-mana instant, draw 2 cards. Divination, smell you later. Now, Divination, not really a constructed player. Few and far between. It's not like we haven't seen Divination in a standard format before, but it's pretty rare. But drawing 2 cards in instant speed for 3 mana, we've seen that on cards like Esper Charm. Obviously, that's a modal spell. There's more going on there, and a couple of other cards. This is another card that falls in the ice out camp for me of, do I think it's going to see constructed play like in a standard format? I can't say that definitively, but would it surprise me if someone said this is the card for the job? Not really.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like a 4-of type of card.
That I agree with.
But filling in the gaps. I mean, this is exactly the kind of card that gets a huge boost to moving to instant speed.
Yeah.
All cards do to some extent, but the biggest issue with Divination is drawing 2 cards for 3 mana a good deal. That really isn't the issue. The issue is that it comes at the expense of protecting yourself with counterspells. Mm-hmm. And often, Divination in constructed, or to the extent that those effects show up, they're really 5-mana plays, because you can divinate and leave up 2 to protect yourself with a counterspell or removal spell. This is so much smoother than that, because you can just pass with your counterspell up, and if they play into you, you can counterspell it, and if they don't, you have something to do with your mana.
Yep.
That is something that Magic, in the early aughts, really tried to move away from. The play pattern of everything is an instant in my blue deck.
It was lame.
And also the power level of instant card drawing and instant counterspell is really, really strong.
Yeah.
That was part of the reason, going way back to Odyssey, that Concentrate got printed. Because Concentrate was supposed to be a shot at, this is card drawing that you would consider playing your control deck. It's clearly not bad, but we don't want to do the bulk rate instant speed card drawing at a really, really pushed rate. Concentrate was supposed to be a replacement for that. Eventually, they moved to Jace's Ingenuity, which is much more modest. And Jace's Ingenuity has showed up infrequently as a 1-of.
Yep.
And I would argue this card is quite a bit stronger because it's way better at finding your land drops early on in the game.
That's true. So Divination, rest in peace. It's been a good run. We've already got in, so that was my number 4, I'm pretty sure. So I want to make sure it was. Your number 4 was Ice Out, so we're going to go and stay with me. Asinine Antics. What a card name. 2 blue sorcery. You may cast Asinine Antics as though it had flash if you pay 2 colorless more to cast it. For each creature your opponents control, create a cursed roll token attached to that creature. If you control another roll on it, put that 1 into the graveyard. And what the cursed roll does is enchanted creature is just a 1/1. Now, I want to make sure of something here. With the cursed roll, it's not like a 1/1 and then it loses all its abilities.
That's my reading of it.
That's my reading of it, right? Yeah,
base stats become 1/1.
Okay, fine. So let's say we're going to agree on that for right now. So a blue sweeper, this sort of is, but also isn't, because it doesn't kill the creatures. And blue is, of course, not going to actually get access to a sweeper. That's a white thing. That's a black thing. That's a red damage sort of thing. But this is kind of their version, their take of it. Sometimes you see, your blue sweeper is bounce all your creatures or something like that, right? So this is the newest version of that. It seems like, and we've said this for Quick Study and Ice Out, this seems like another card that feels like a 1 or a 2 of.
Yeah, and this almost made my list of top 5 designs because I really love, whether or not you want to call this a sweeper, that's kind of up to you, but I do really like sweepers where the second copy is way worse than the first copy.
Oh, yeah, and that's true of this one.
And that's often not the case with Wrath of God because if you're playing around Wrath of God, you're holding back 1 or 2 things. Your opponent wraths you, you play your 1 or 2 things. The second copy wraths you, and then you're done.
It's over.
And the second copy is clearly so much worse than the first copy that, again, maybe you play 1 or 2. Great.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. This is another card. I feel like a broken record here, like the last 2 cards on my list, where if it showed up, I wouldn't be surprised. And also, if it didn't show up, I would not be surprised. Maybe it's a sideboard card, something like that. But this is not a... boom, you have to play 4 copies of this card right away. None of my cards like that for blue are on the list that made my list are like that. So Aside Antics, at the very least, it has a really, really cool name. Speaking of cool names, number 3 on your list is Picklock Prankster. This is an adventure card, so that means I have to pull double duty here. The Prankster is 1 and a blue. It's a 2-mana fairy rogue, 1/3 flying vigilance. Maybe more importantly, there's Free the Fae, which is the adventure aspect of it, a 2-mana instant from 1 and 1 blue. Mill 4 cards, then put an instant sorcery or fairy card from among the milled cards into your hand. Why do you like this uncommon?
So Free the Fae, the adventure part, I like that it speaks to creature types while being a little bit softer about it. This is not just an enabler for 20 lands, 40 fairies, but a deck that's a mixture of fairies and spells.
Okay.
And I like, even with the creature type matter sort of stuff, making sure there's an incentive to play with other card types. Often those decks end up looking really homogenous.
Okay.
And this is a very subtle way of moving it more towards, just play with some spells too, because you can hit it off of this thing.
Okay, sure.
I also like 1/3 flying vigilance, specifically to give a body to give to fairies. So much of the fairies experience and the all flyer experience historically is I'm not blocking, I'm just running you down as fast as possible in the air. This still has a little bit of it because it is a flying creature, so it's not off message.
Yep.
But a lot of the rate comes in your ability to block, or at least threaten to block, which is historically not something these sort of decks really enable or support in any meaningful way.
Fairy's not known for blocking.
No.
Fairy is known for racing.
So this is definitely a card that looks like a fairy, and there's a lot of fun stuff going on with it. But, it's a small thing. Some people think things like stats and, the evergreen keywords don't constitute a design. Mm-hmm. That's not enough going on, enough different to really be a design. But I think this is a really well-crafted game piece that speaks to what I consider to be some of the shortcomings in the fairies play pattern historically.
Let's move on to number 2 for me. Now, if there is a card that could be a 4 of from this set in blue, I think it could be this. It's Sleight of Hand, single blue sorcery, and this is a reprint. Look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library. So we don't see your preordains and your brainstorms and your, what's the other one? Ponder. There it is. Your ponders of the world really all that often in standard level play. Sleight of Hand, consider, those are fine cards. Consider, I think, is better than this card. But I also think it might be deck dependent too. So, Sleight of Hand is a card that has seen standard level play before, depending on the format. And this is just card selection. Just you get to look at 2 cards, take one of them with you, put the other one away. It has a pedigree of being a pretty good card. I don't think it's the best blue card in the set, given that it's number 2. But look, would this surprise you if this saw play and there's some sort of blue, tempo-y, delverish deck? Not really.
Also keep in mind celebrations in the set. I know it doesn't appear in blue, but Sleight of Hand's a great enabler for chaining together multiple spells and multiple tournaments in one turn.
Sure.
Setting up your shop and all of that.
Yeah.
I love this card as a reprint here.
Okay.
The name just fits the world so well.
Very much so. And the artwork.
Yeah. And I think Sleight of Hand is a little bit underrated when you're talking about the what are perceived to be the best cantrips in Magic. Brainstorm and Ponder are the top of most people's lists, and then a step down would be Preordain.
Mm-hmm.
And Ponder and Brainstorm are eternal formats only, and very heavily subsidized by the fetch lands.
Yep.
Cantrips that actually come with the selection baked in, like Sleight of Hand, are become roughly as powerful as some of those cards once you remove the fetch lands. And we're not talking about fetch lands here.
Yeah.
So I think Sleight of Hand's got a really... The opportunity cost is so low, the selection's really powerful.
That's what I was going to say. This just feels safe.
Yeah.
You know, it's not anything over the top. It's a totally fine card, but it's not ridiculous in any way.
And it's also safer than Consider, if you're just talking about what's a risk to Standard or Pioneer or Modern or whatever. One, sorcery versus instant, just very different animals.
Yep.
And two, filling up the graveyard is its own thing. And this is pure selection.
Yeah.
There's no synergy that you're getting out of it unless you somehow get value out of knowing the bottom card of your library.
Sure, which is pretty rare.
Yeah.
We're going to go on to number 2 for you, which is the Tenacious Tombseeker. 3 mana, 2 and a blue, human knight. It's a 3/2 with bargain. And when Tenacious Tombseeker enters the battlefield, if it was bargained, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand.
A lot going on with this card, while it just being a vanilla once it's in play.
True.
That is very hard to get right. And there's a lot of options with this thing. I also, again, I'm a huge fan of getting people to sort of split up their card types. And you have a creature that cares about instants and sorceries, but also requires an artifact, enchantment, or token to get the sum of the parts. And the card is not weak. I mean, 3/2. I mean, you know, I'm not saying this comparison to suggest its power level, just to anchor the conversation. Eternal Witness is a 3-mana card. It's hard to cast.
Yep.
The body's not as good.
Yep.
Assuming that you would largely want to get back instants and sorceries, which is typically what you do with regrowth effects. You're down tempo, so you need to get immediacy on the way back.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming that you can facilitate the bargain in a way that's not a huge opportunity cost, and, you know, treasures all over the place, food. You know, there's ways to do it if you really mean it. The card has I think it has a shot of being a card to consider and constructed, depending on what the incentives are. But I do, even if that's not the case, I really do like the a lot of stuff going on, a lot of decisions to make, a lot of spread of card types, and the card is super simple once it's in play.
Yeah.
None of this is putting a burden on the opponent, I guess, other than sort of tracking the card that went back to hand, maybe. And the player with the card gets a lot of decision making, a lot to think about.
I do like that it is a lot of different card types. I think that's a really key thing that you mentioned. The fact that you do need something to bargain away to make this a real card. And then, of course, you are incentivized to play with instants and sorceries, and this is a creature. So that's actually pretty unique.
And again, another little thing about this, it's not the total story, but it's another thing, is I also really like the stats being a 3/2.
Okay.
This card, the baseline of bargain plus regrowth, suggests defensive. That's the body that you want.
Yep.
Making it a 3/2 is another step towards... There's a weird collection of things going on here. It's not that any one bit of this card is super slot efficient. It's just that if you're kind of in the market for a mix of all of it, you would consider playing with it. I think this design is, say, an 05. I'm not saying whether that design would be weaker or stronger, but I think that's a much worse design. It's giving you the thing that you want along with the rest of the stuff. A 3/2 is, and I kind of want to be aggressive too on top of everything else.
Yep.
It's a lot to think about.
It's time for number 1 on my list as far as competitive constructed cards are concerned. I'm going with Farsight Ritual. It is 2 UU, so a 4-mana instant with bargain. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. If this spell was bargained, look at the top 8 cards of your library instead. Put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Again, reminder that this is an instant. First thing that I thought of with this was Memory Deluge. Now, Memory Deluge, this is not, of course, because Memory Deluge has flashback. I think Memory Deluge is probably a better card than this one, but better is contextual because it is certainly format dependent. And looking at the top 8 cards, if you're able to bargain this, but that's a lot of cards.
Yeah, that's a ton.
A ton of cards. I mean, that's obviously dig through time territory there. So This is a card where, again, I would be a little surprised if this were a 4 of, but do I think this will see standard play? I do.
Yeah, another good example of giving people the instant speed card drawing experience. But this one, again, is much like a lot of the other bargain cards, and the reason that I like the mechanic a fair bit is diminishing returns. the second, third copy end up becoming harder and harder to execute, and also the value of looking at the next 8 and the next 8 goes down over time.
Sure.
So there's a very natural. This is not chaining Sphinx's Revelations together.
Oh,
Thank
goodness.
It's not chaining Dig Through Times together because you're not getting the huge mana rebate.
Sure.
The first copy is going to be really, really good. The second, third, fourth, they're probably going to get worse over time, not better, which is not always the case with the card drawing spells.
That's true. So, Standard is in a kind of a mid-rangey slog right now, but this set, I imagine, is going to shake some things up, and maybe this is the blue card drawer that we generally see at 4 mana that's going to mix things up a little bit. And again, with the bargain aspect of things, artifact, enchantment, or token, you have to find some ways to, I think you're incentivized to find some ways to put that sort of stuff in your deck to be able to turn this on. So that's number 1 for me. For you, I was going to make a whale noise. I don't really know what noise a whale makes, really.
I don't have no firsthand experience.
Okay, yeah, so I'm not going to do that anymore. Maybe we could get something piped in. Who knows? Horned Lock Whale. 6 mana, 4 blue. Creature type, whale. Kind of gave that away. Flash, Ward 2, means it's going to be hard to kill. Horned Lock Whale enters the battlefield tapped unless it's your turn. So if I cast it on my own turn, it's untapped as a 6/6. If I cast it on my opponent's turn, it's like a ha-ha, got you blocker. Not quite, because it's tapped. There's an adventure attached to this card. Lagoon Breach. So for 1 and a blue, instant, the owner of target attacking creature you don't control puts it on top or bottom of their library. That's Azorius Charm?
No, Zoria's Charm is always on top.
Is it? Okay.
This one is, I think it's always on top.
I haven't read it in a while. I'm going to load her up real quick.
I could be wrong.
That's okay.
It's been a while since I...
Put target attacking your on top of its owner's library. Yep, always on top. You're right.
So this is the other player gets to choose.
Okay.
So I love that this is the Lagoon Breach is a really good capsizing story.
Okay.
Put a creature on top or bottom. This is like really, really great for getting that point across. I like the fact that there's incentive to play it on your turn or their turn, depending on what you care about.
Yep.
Do I want to block right now versus do I want to have the ability to play it at their end step with the implications that come along with this?
Yep.
I think sometimes Magic is a little too indulgent with the flash creature experience needing to be the rate coming from surprise blocking. And this one is very transparently not that, although it's not a 0 there because a 6/6 Ward 2 can also block pretty effectively. It's just not what the card is about.
Yeah.
I think that's especially important when it's on an adventure, so it's going to be face up. Like, we shouldn't be tricking people with the creature.
Sure. Okay. Yep. That's a good point.
A really good game piece. I think this will play really, really well. And the story here is really strong, but all this reads like a blue card. It's not like this is just a whale. This is a collection of stuff you would see in blue all the time. But as a whale story, it's really great.
One of the things I like about this card, too, is so let's say you do have to just play it on your main phase as a blocker right now, right? Okay, well, there's some power baked into doing that. Like, you're taking a risk by just tapping out, but your creature has Ward 2, and so they've got to kind of work for it to kill it,
Yeah.
which I think is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I like you're taking a risk by not having your mana, but you're putting your eggs into a relatively secure basket.
Yes, but not always.
Yeah, but not always.
Yeah.
And you also don't even have to do it. If you're worried about it, you could still just be like, okay, I'll play it at the end of your turn.
Yeah,
play
sure.
around sorcery or whatever.
Sure.
So you're controlling it,
Yep.
whatever the decision is, but the risks and rewards are very transparent.
Yeah, like you might find some value of just going, okay, I'm going to go to 5, and then I'm going to play this on the end of their turn, and then untap, and now my big blocker's here with my mana up.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. That's a real decision.
Yeah, but like, what if they play a haste creature? Then it's
Backfired.
Then it's like, oh wow, that was bad.
Yeah,
I wish I had cast the thing.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah. No,
so it's not. Well, you can imagine how there's pros and cons to which turn you want to play it on, where reasonable people could disagree on what the play is.
For sure. Everybody, those are our blue cards. Quick little rundown once again. My list: number 5 is Ice Out. Number 4 is Quick Study. Number 3 is Asinine Antics. Love that card name. Number 2 is Sleight of Hand. And number 1 is Farsight Ritual. For Patrick, number 5 is Archive Dragon. Number 4 is Ice Out. Do you know what killed the dinosaurs?
The Ice Age!
Number 3 is Picklock Trickster. slash Free the Fae. Number 2 is Tenacious Tombseeker. And number 1 is Hornlock Whale alongside Lagoon Breach. Those are our blue cards and our predictions and our preview of Wilds of Eldraine. Of course, you can go back and watch our episode on the white cards and, of course, the mechanics, our very first one in this run of episodes. But coming up next, the black cards, of which I think there is, at least on my side of things, a very clear-cut number 1.
I don't know about clear-cut number 1 on my side, but talking about some rats. A lot of rat designs I like.
Yeah. Rats are kind of cool. We finally get to dive into them. There's no real rats in white. There's mouse. There's not a rat. And then nothing in blue. So when we go to black, we bring the rats to you. See you soon.